Conducting a successful interview with Keenan and Caleb Hauff. They are co-founders of Threefold company, and both are Bismarck natives, and both have been extensively involved in video and cinematography work. And so, without further ado, please welcome Keenan and Caleb Hauff.
All right, hello everybody. My name is Keenan Hauff.
I'm Caleb Hauff.
And we own Threefold Video Production here in Bismarck, and we are brothers as well. So how's everybody's day going? You guys have a good day so far? Awesome. Good to hear. We saved the most boring topic for last, so if you guys fall asleep, don't. You can fall, no, don't fall asleep. Interviews are super basic, and they seem super basic, and they can be really basic, and there's a million ways to do them right. But there's a million ways to do them wrong, too. There's a lot of things that you can do to make your interviews a lot more successful and be really, really happy with the way that you do it.
Yeah, and there's, like Keenan said, there's tons of ways to do it wrong, and it's easy to overlook and kind of just breeze over and not listen. But there are a lot of, it can be one of the most important parts of your film or video or whatever you're doing and can have a huge impact. And me and Keenan speak from experience from doing a lot of them, and the more we've done them, the more we realize that they're not as simple as they seem, and there's always something to learn new with them. So if you pull back up the PowerPoint, we're going to be covering two parts to this, and the first part is going to be the technical stuff. So the technical stuff is going to include the lighting, the sound, the camera composition, and everything that goes in with the setup that we have here. And then the second part is going to be the actual interview itself and some techniques and some things that we do to see it be a little bit more successful and to make the people behind the camera a little more comfortable. And as we go over some of this stuff, there's a lot of equipment up here. Some of you guys might not have access to all that, but be creative. Get creative with how you guys use your equipment and use lights, use windows as lights. Use different things to do your budgets or do your films on a low budget. So the first part we're going to cover is the basic three-point lighting. So by show of hands, how many people know or have heard of the three-point lighting? Man, not many. That is good. We got some things to teach you then. So the four, it's 3 and 4, you know. There's 4 up there. It's 3-point. Key, fill, and hair. So who out there can tell me what the key light does? Someone? Anyone? Okay.
Main
good.
light.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Your key light is your main light. It's going to be doing all of the lighting. The majority of it, it's your most important. If you take the other 2 away, you can get by with 1 light, and we'll touch on that in just a bit. Your fill light does exactly what it says it does. It fills in what the key light isn't hitting, helps reduce harsh shadows, things like that. And then your hair light, your third one, is going to be the one that helps distinguish your subject from the background. It's really simple, but it can be really important, especially in a scenario like this. We're going to be setting up a really basic one here, but in a situation like this, when you have someone with dark hair in a black background, if you don't have a hair light, their head's just going to disappear into the background, and there's no separating their hair, their head, from the background, and it can look really funny.
And there's a lot of scenarios where you don't have to use a hair light. If there's and we have an example of that too, where you have someone with dark hair on a light background, and you don't need to separate them from the background because you can pretty easily see they're not sinking away into the background. So we have a few examples we'll kind of show you and explain what we used and what we did to kind of get the look we have.
So here's a perfect example. This is something we shot a couple months ago. And this was a shot where for the key light we used a window, actually. And a lot of times that's what we prefer to use because you get really great light from the window, and it can be a really minimal setup with great results. For fill, we used same LEDs as we have up here, and hair light, same thing, we used LEDs. Go ahead and next one. This is another example. This one you used a key and a fill. We didn't end up using hair light.
And for the key, again, we used light. And as you can tell, probably in this was a very small room. So we were super limited, but we did it with just one light. And it's a pretty natural looking interview, I'd say. It doesn't look necessarily like it was lit, but his face is still exposed properly. You have a nice background. And we chose to not go with a hair light, one, for the size of the room. And the second reason was he had dark hair, the background was light, there was that separation there. So it wasn't as vital to have that compared to if that would have been a really dark background.
So you see, we had the window light coming out on this side, and then for the fill light, we had one light that was bouncing off of a wall. So rather than pointing the light directly at him, we took and set the light and pointed it towards the wall, and it created a lot softer, lighter glow on his face that wasn't such a harsh, direct light right beside him.
Yeah, and that's the important thing too with lighting. A lot of lights that you guys have, whether they're LEDs or just normal lights, or you can even use hardware lights, which when I first started, that was a big one that I used. I just used basically whatever I could get. But a big thing you want to do when you do it is you want to use diffusion, because a lot of them will be really harsh. And with this is a pretty simple form that we're using here, but it's just a really simple way to soften the light, because if you just hit them straight on with light, you're going to have some really harsh, drastic shadows. And so by diffusing, you get a lot softer light, and it looks a lot more flattering.
So these lights are daylight temperature. Who knows what, like, number K is daylight temperature?
Okay, so
Anyone?
color temperature for daylight would be about 5,000. And when you're shooting interviews, that's another essential part to lighting. When we use daylight as our key light, we make sure that our other two lights that we're using in conjunction with it are daylight balanced. The lights you see in here are really warm. A lot of them are tungsten. So you don't want to be mixing daylight and tungsten or whatever it would be, because when you start mixing a lot of lights, you start getting weird skin tones, and it can just not help with the interview and the way it looks. So you want to stick with the same color temperature lights.
So these are some examples of key and fill lights, and we're going to show you some examples of breaking that rule. And you can always break rules, and that's the great thing about cinematography and doing videos is you can always do something new. You can always try something new. But when you try something new or you break some rules, make sure you have a reason behind it. And we have a few examples here. This is a Vimeo staff pick by Breakwater Studios. And it was just recently picked, and it was something that caught our eye. So this was the interview that they did, and it was just a single point lighting, and it's really drastic and really harsh. You can see how you can hardly see the whole right side of his face. But the reason it worked and the reason it was so close is because it was a really intimate, really heavy topic. He had just talked about how his business had failed, and shortly thereafter, a few months later, his wife was diagnosed with cancer. So it was a really emotional topic for him. And he was really opening up. There's one point in the interview that he almost broke into tears, and you can see him and hear it in his voice, the emotion that's coming through. And so the drastic lighting and the close shot really helped portray that story rather than setting something farther away like we have in this video, or something that's really well lit. So this worked for their story. So make sure you have an interview set up that really works for your story and helps tell your story.
This next example, this one caught my eye personally, and I've really gravitated towards it because of the way they lit it. And I'll give you a little context to what's happening. This was made by Veta Brevis Films, and they're a film production company out of Salt Lake City, Utah. And they did this for a distilling company. And what's so unique about this to me is they interviewed 3 guys that started this business. All 3 of them really had a passion for distilling and wanted to make it a business. But they're all very unique in the film, and that's shown. But the way that they lit each one so separately and unique really portrays and helps put that into place, how unique each one of them is. And in the top right, you can see that guy. He's kind of the engine behind the whole operation. And he's the only one that has a wide shot, and it really tells the story. It helps show the tools and everything he uses in the background really well, and it's really unique too, the way that they lit it.
So
and
he's the one that had all the knowledge of how to distill. He was their technical guy that knew everything from the starting to ending to making really great distilling drinks.
Yeah, and then the other thing, and the reason I really like this and wanted to bring it to your guys' attention is, for this, as you probably could tell, they have one source of lighting, and that's just a key light. And for that, they didn't even use a light. They used a garage. So it was super basic, super simple, and something anyone could do without a lot of equipment. And the way they did that too is it's just a single point lighting, really drastic lighting, but they made it work. And they took the time to set it up right and get it positioned, the people, and then they had reasonings for doing short side lighting on the top right guy, broad side on the bottom. And to give you context to what that means is when you have someone facing, doing an interview, off-camera interview, where they're not looking into the camera, they're always going to be looking off either to the right or to the left. And whichever way where you see the most of their face, the broad side of their face would be, so on the bottom, that would be the broad side of his face. Obviously, it's the one that's getting hit with the key light, so that would be broad side.
That has the most light. The broadside lighting has the most light. And then the top, the short side lighting, you see, you have the broad side of his face, but it's all dark. So that's considered short side lighting, because you see the shortest little bit of his face that's actually being lit by the key light.
Yeah, and they're both super simple techniques. There's tons of other, you can Google and research tons of different lighting techniques like Rembrandt, and there's so many ways with photography and film, both apply. And they're just different. They're both different ways to do it. Neither one's right, neither one's wrong, and it's super simple to do too with a little bit of research, so.
And these helped tell their stories. They all had a different, unique thing that they brought to the distillery. And the first two that were interviewed were the two on the right side that had a darker interview. And they talked a lot more about the challenges and the struggles that they faced as a business and starting. And about 3/4 or halfway through, the last guy was introduced, and he really talked about their process and why they chose to do what they did. And so it made sense for them, that interview, to be a little bit farther away and not so close and personal, because the topic was a little less close and personal for most. So on to the next part. Now we've covered lighting. The next part that we're going to cover for the technical stuff is sound. And sound is just as important as the video.
And there's two main ways that we do sound when me and Keenan set up for interviews. What we have set up right here is a boom mic, and that's usually our go-to. That's what we have for our main source. And then we always do a lav mic as a backup. Now, you can do a lav mic as your main one and do a boom mic as your backup. It doesn't matter. We prefer boom, but both are really great options, and they're something to not overlook. And a lot of times, it's really easy to set up an interview, make sure your frame looks good, check with the camera, and then overlook checking your audio levels, over-checking, or not checking if there's noise in the background, things like that. So the biggest thing with audio is set up good audio, put just as high of importance on it as video, and test it. Always test your audio. Put on the headphones before anyone's ever even in there, before your interviewee sits down, and make sure that there's not clocks and fans, appliances, things beeping in the background, because we found ourselves a lot of times overlooking it, and we didn't even notice the sound in the background that the mic was picking up. So it's really easy to overlook, and testing it.
Don't screw it up.
Yeah.
No, but just take a little extra time to make sure there's not a crackle in the microphone that picks up when they move around a little bit. Put your headphones on and really give it a listen, because sometimes you can't hear the fan in the background that's just blowing a little bit, and the mic is picking it up, and you don't realize the mic's picking it up as loud as it is. And you can all of a sudden get into the editing process, and half of your interview is ruined because something is going on in the background, and it really pulls away. And sound is one more of those things that you just don't want to distract from what they're saying. You don't want to distract them from the story anymore with distractions in the audio.
So the next one we got is camera composition and setup. And this one, there's a lot of ways to do it. But these are kind of good rules to go off, rules of thumbs. And that one is, and like I said, with lighting, you can try to break the rules. You can try something new. That's the part of being creative, and it's part of what makes making films really fun. But keeping your A camera, which in this case, this is going to be our A camera, and this is our B camera. Keeping it at eye level will really help the viewer to connect with the person being interviewed. A lot of times shooting too low can be a little unflattering, things like that. The other thing you want to do is avoid wide-angle lenses, and there's two main reasons for this. One, wide-angle lenses can make people look unflattering. It can stretch their face. The perspective on wide-angle lenses just isn't the best go-to choice for interviews. And the other thing is
just because it's going to make them feel uncomfortable, because it's going to have to be a lot closer than it is. And so, like Daniel talked about, they had a lot of actors and a lot of people that are used to acting on set and doing things that will help them, or they're doing things that they're used to. Whereas in an interview, a lot of times you're with people that are nervous about being interviewed. They're not very comfortable behind the camera, and so they really want to be able to feel as comfortable as possible. And so you really want to be able to distance yourself a little bit, kind of let them forget that the camera is even there.
Yeah. And then the other thing is for B camera. So that kind of covers some like little things on A camera composition and stuff, and we'll go over a little bit more here. We're gonna have some people come up in just a second and help us with that. With B camera and A camera, you never want objects coming out of people's heads. It's always
Can we switch back
important
to the presentation real quick?
it's always really important to make sure that when you set up an interview and you put someone in the seat, that there's not something like a pole or something coming out of someone's head. That's the last thing you want in an interview is, you know, bunny ears in the back or something that's distracting.
Or a tree or something, like I said with audio, a pole or a tree coming out of their head in the background can be one more thing to distract them from what they're saying. And a lot of times it's a matter of moving the camera a few inches to the right or a few inches to the left, or the interviewer a few inches. So it doesn't take much to avoid those distractions. And then the last part about the camera composition, this kind of goes for A and B camera. When you position someone, don't pin them up against the wall. Give them a little bit of space between them and the background. So you give them a little bit of room to breathe, and they don't feel so pinned up with a wall right behind them. So moving on to B camera.
And we can have some people come up. We're going to need someone to be in the hot seat, be the interviewee, someone to be the interviewer, and then person on key and fill, or fill and hair light, excuse me, and then one on the key light.
So 4 or 5? How many do we need? Four. We need
We're gonna need
four
four people.
volunteers. All right. I saw that hand go up really fast. Pink sleeves, jean jacket, and then somebody from the back. Who wants to get squirrely in the back? All right, you can come up.
So while you guys are coming up, I'm just going to cover the importance of a B camera. B camera is super great. It makes editing and post-production way easier to cut an interview, because when you're cutting it,
All right.
it doesn't have to feel like you're cutting out parts because you're just switching to a new camera angle.
We'll have you sit there.
So we're going to set this
We'll
up
have
here.
you sit here. Then we'll have you on. So as we set this up, can we bring the house lights down? We're going to bring you around to this side. And we're going to show you, we're going to switch to this. Maybe.
Okay, these just turn
All right, we'll leave it at this for a second. We're going to kind of show you how adding in, can we have the house lights just a little bit brighter for right now? Or the stage lights too even? Just dimmed. We're going to show you how adding each light kind of affects the look of the interview.
Okay, so we're just going to bounce back on the original topics we talked on, which was lighting. So first, we're just going to bounce back to lighting, and so you guys can see on screen. So right now on the screen, you can tell that's the key light. Now, like you said, this is kind of similar to what we saw in some of those interviews, those single-point lighting setups that we showed you. So now, if you want to turn on the fill light once for us. Now, I'll turn this up just a hair. Now the fill light, you don't want it to overpower the key light unless you're looking for a really even. You still want your key light to be your strongest source of lighting.
Can we switch to camera 8? So we'll get focused here. You're doing great. So do you want to flip the fill light off for a second? So
Okay.
do you see how that fills in the right side of her face, kind of takes away some of those really harsh shadows? So another thing to point out before we turn on the hair light is right now, right here, she sort of just sinks off into the background, and you can't really tell where the background is or where her head ends, and it can make it look a lot longer than it is. So that's the importance of a hair light with a dark background. So we'll turn the fill light back on.
There we go. So now, and obviously these could be adjusted a lot more, but we won't fiddle with the lights for too long on stage here to save time.
So we'll have you look at the interviewer. Now, if we turn this on and off, You can sort of see that on the screen, how much of a difference that makes. It kind of lights up her shoulder right here. It brings some light to the back of her head, and it doesn't let her sink off just into kind of oblivion.
So yeah. Now the next thing.
Perfect example.
With the boom, I'm sure everyone's pretty familiar with booms. You've always seen them in TV shows, them bouncing into camera shots, everything like that. Now, in our case, we always like to use a C-stand, and now that's not going to be the case with everything. But obviously, you're going to want the boom as close as you can without getting in the camera. It's a pretty obvious, you don't want that in the camera. And the other thing that we choose to do is we choose to use a C-stand because it's less distracting too. A lot of times you see people, even if you have a person holding the boom mic, there's going to be a little bit of movement, and if you have something moving up and down in front of a person while they're being interviewed, it's not exactly the most comfortable thing. It makes you feel, someone that's not comfortable being in front of a camera is going to feel a little bit uncomfortable. So
another thing to point out that's unique to who our interviewee is right now is if you notice on her glasses, there's a glare. And we won't take the time right now, but a lot of times you can get that glare away, and you can pull that away by just moving the lights in a few different directions, or lifting them up just a few inches, or lifting them down. And when she's looking, and you want to make sure that's all set up when she's looking at the interviewer. So that's another thing to take into consideration, that there's not a super harsh glare on somebody's glasses, because they want to be able to see their eyes while they're being interviewed.
Perfect. Okay, so we're going to move to the camera composition in cameras. So if you want to be on this, and the way this works too, we'll talk about this. You can do a slider with it, and then this just locks it. So, and then if you want to come over here, there's not a bunch to do, but I'll have you just man the A camera.
Woman, the A camera.
Yes.
Or man.
Okay, so with camera composition, did we touch on 180 degree rule?
No, we haven't yet.
I don't think we touched on 180 degree rule. And this is a
switch
super...
back to the PowerPoint really quick?
So 180 degree rule, how many have heard of this by chance? Okay, so we got a few. That's really good. Now, this is super important when you're shooting with two cameras, and it pertains to a lot of things. It pertains to dialogue in films, it pertains to interviews, it pertains to basketball games and sports. And what this does is, could we get split screen both cameras up here once? Okay, so right now, as you can tell, looking at the frame, we have two cameras. Obviously, we have A and B, and the interviewee is looking off to the right of the frame, which is good. So when you're editing that, every time you cut from A camera to B camera to A camera, you'll be getting the person looking off to the same direction, and you'll get the sense that they're talking to the same person.
So
now,
both screens, you can see she's looking off to the right side on both of them. So what you don't want to do is, we'll show it right here, and we'll have Caleb grab camera B, and this would be breaking the 180 degree rule. Is right here, imagine there's a line, and you can see it in that picture. You don't want to cross that imaginary line, and that imaginary line kind of starts where the interviewer is. And if we once we switch back to this split screen, you'll see that in one camera, she is, and we'd move that light normally. Well, you wouldn't shoot like this, but in one camera, she is looking off to the right, and the other camera, she's looking off to the left. So it can be really confusing to know who she's actually talking to, or who they're talking to, who their interviewee is, and it just is going to pull them away, like one more thing to pull them away from the actual interview. So now we'll show you a few examples of side profile. You want to grab B and move it?
yeah.
So the great thing about the 180 degree rule is you can start right at that interviewer and go all the way around to get right behind her, get a side profile, and it still works because she's still looking off to the same side. She's still looking off to the left side of the frame.
So now, as you can tell, and you can get really creative with the B camera. And the great thing about a B camera, and not that you're always going to have one when you're shooting, but when you have one, like Keenan said, you can get side profiles, you can get hand movement shots. They're really great for editing. You can punch in and get a lot tighter shots for when the interview and the interviewee is getting really, emotional or intense parts of the interview. So it can be really useful and helpful for that, just like she's doing, getting a tight shot. So that kind of explains the 180-degree rule where even though we're doing a side profile shot, she's looking off to the right in both shots, and that's exactly what you want. And like I said, this pertains to basketball, it pertains to sports and dialogues, because with basketball, for instance, if you'd have cameras breaking that 180-degree rule, one shot you'd have A team running down the court going left, and then if you switch to a shot on the opposite side, you could have B team running in the exact same direction and just get disorientating.
So, and the last thing is the B camera, as you kind of saw there, the B camera can really pick up a lot of body language and a lot of things that she's expressing through her facial expressions or things with her hands. A little more detail shots that the A camera can't pick up because it's a little bit wider. So,
and one last thing we'll do, now you can't see directly, but I'll have you scoot just a hair this way for me once. Now, if you see the composition right now, you can kind of see that there's a C-stand and then there's that film strip in the background. And this isn't a bad scenario, but if that film strip wasn't there and it was just the chrome C-stand in the back, that would be an example of what we were talking about where something's coming out of their head, it's really distracting, and you just want to avoid that, where A camera, we don't have that. It's just her on a black canvas. And you can have objects in the background, but when it's sticking out like a sore thumb, that's not something you want. So yeah.
all right, that concludes part one. So give it up for all of our volunteers. I can take that. Amazing job. And now we're going to move on to the second part, the interview itself with the interviewee. So this is a part that we take really seriously, that we really like to kind of go above and beyond, because this is another part that really is a make or break for your interview. And we've gotten good at it just through doing lots and lots of interviews, and we get better every time that we do one. So practice definitely helps us get better.
So the first thing is prep. Now, we always take it pretty seriously when we don't want someone to sit in on the camera and be where they're supposed to be for the interview if we haven't set up lights, if we haven't set up audio or camera or any of that stuff. We want to have that stuff prepared beforehand, because if you set someone in there, the interviewee, and all of a sudden you're fiddling with lights and setting up stuff and testing all that stuff, it's going to make them more nervous, because oftentimes, like Keenan said, and we've said multiple times, when you're doing an interview, you're trying to get a really authentic reaction, and you want to get real with the person. And most people you have on camera aren't used to being on camera unless they're an actor or something like that. But
So a lot of times, people aren't comfortable being behind a camera, like I said, and so you want to eliminate the amount of time that they have to sit behind the camera. And so if you sit them behind the camera and you're still setting up tripods and setting up lights and setting up audio, it gives them that much more time to think about and be nervous about the interview and noticing every little thing around them. Whereas if you can have everything ready so that they sit down and you make a little adjustment or something, and all they have to do is think about the questions that you're talking to them about, it pulls a lot of those distractions away.
And that's why we avoid things like action, rolling, sound, speed. And those are really great when you're on a film and you're working with actors. But when you're working with someone who's not used to being on a camera, yelling out action is only going to make them nervous. And so a lot of times, what me and Keenan do, we'll start rolling the camera ever before they even think it's rolling, and you can get really great reactions, great smiles, things like that from your interviewee. So
the second part is research. Know who you're interviewing. If you're doing an interview for a company or for a single person, know a little bit about them. Go above and beyond what the interview is actually about and the 5 things that you want to cover, and have some things to talk to them about that will relate personally to them. And while you're in the interview, don't be afraid to talk about those things. It'll make them more comfortable. It'll let them trust you, and they'll in turn give you a lot better answers and be a lot more authentic with you on camera. There's a lot of times we'll have a few minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes of footage of the interview that doesn't really apply to what we're talking about, but it made them a lot more comfortable while they're sitting there getting ready and talking about it. And then when we get to the questions that we really want the answers for, they're ready to answer them because they answered things that they really liked about. If they like dogs, you can talk about dogs for a few minutes. All of a sudden you ask them about their business and they're really comfortable on a roll, like, yeah, no, this is how we do it. And they're a lot smoother that way.
Yeah, and that goes into our next topic, which is connecting with the person. This is hands down one of the most important parts, is being able to connect with who you're doing an interview with. It can absolutely make or break it. You can have great audio, you can have great sound, but if at the end of the day the person wasn't comfortable, if they didn't give you a good interview, that can a lot of times be your fault. And we take that a lot of times very personally. If an interview didn't turn out, you can't instantly point fingers at the person you're interviewing, because you knew going in they weren't comfortable. It was your job to make them comfortable and be able to connect with them. And this is where Keenan's really good, because when we do a shoot, I'm the one behind the camera doing a lot of the technical stuff, and Keenan's the one that sits down. And once we get in an interview and start talking with that interviewee, he doesn't fiddle with the camera. He's not touching any of the lights. He's not messing with the sound. He is 100% engaged with who he's interviewing and nothing else. Because when you can connect with them and make them feel like they're sitting down for coffee instead of sitting down in front of a camera, you're going to get so much better sound bites. You're going to get way better interview.
And I start that conversation a long time before we ever sit down in the interview. There's a lot of times I'll be in another room or outside while we're still setting up, just outside the room where the interview will be taking place. And Caleb will be getting things ready, and I'll have a chance to talk with them and have a conversation. And at that point, I can go, yeah, hey, let's take a seat, and we'll just kind of keep getting things ready. And all of a sudden, we're starting into the interview, and they don't even really know that it's happening yet. So that brings us to the next point of questions, how you ask questions. And so we have Christian from the presentation earlier on zombies. You guys remember him. He's going to be helping us out for an interview. Christian will have you take a seat there. And I'm going to run him through a few questions, and I want you guys to pick out a few things on how we do the first interview. Is everybody ready? Everybody
ready.
thank Christian for coming up and helping us.
Hey, guys.
All right, so Christian, is this your first film festival you've ever been to?
Yes.
What's your favorite food?
Hot dog.
How is your flight here?
Good.
Okay.
Okay,
Can we play back what we got from him?
Thanks, guys. Oh.
All right, they're going to pull that up, and then we're going to point out a few things on what happened in that interview. All right, so Christian, is this your first film festival you've ever been to?
Yes.
What's your favorite food?
Hot dog.
How is your flight here?
Good.
Okay. Here's something to point out since we had the video. If any of you were paying attention, what was one thing that you noticed about the interviewee? What was he doing?
What was I doing wrong? Exactly. So I was asking a lot of bad questions to start with, and I was spending a lot of time looking at my piece of paper. And you probably couldn't tell that from there, but that's another thing that can distract, because if I'm interviewing him and Christian is sitting there and I ask him a question and I look right back down at the paper, he really thinks that I don't care about his answer. And if I'm spending a majority of my time looking at the piece of paper instead of him, I don't care what he's saying. I'm thinking about the next question or some things that are not important to what he's saying. And what he's saying should be the most important thing coming across.
And not only
switch back to the presentation real quick.
Yeah. And not only was it the answers that were wrong, he was giving one-word answers, which was very obvious, and obviously this was exaggerated in this case. But the second thing was, in the video you could tell he was uncomfortable, because the person he was talking to was too engaged with the piece of paper, so his body language didn't look natural, he didn't look comfortable, and he didn't look like he wanted to be there. So that's another important thing, is that not only the audio, but how his body language speaks for him.
So no yes or no questions, and know your questions before you go in and be able to rephrase them. So something that you can do is, if you ask a bad question or you realize they gave a bad answer, like hot dog, you can spin it and go, oh, wow, that's awesome. What do you love about hot dogs so much? Why is hot dogs your favorite food? And all of a sudden you can start getting the answers that you want to get, even if you asked a closed-ended question and they gave you a one-word answer. Know how to spin their answer into another question and get them to talk a little bit more about it.
So we're gonna do that same thing one more time, We're going to do the bad interview, and we're going to re-record it. So, and we want to just play it back. And this will be a good example of...
Bad interview?
How much time do we got?
We can do it. We can do it, guy.
Yeah, we'll do it.
Okay. Scene.
Hi, welcome. Is this your first film festival?
Yes.
What's your favorite food, for the record?
Hot dog.
I don't like hot dogs.
Oh,
How's the flight?
it was good.
Okay. I don't like flying very much, so.
Oh.
Okay, perfect. There we go.
Thank you.
10 out of 10.
That was awesome. Oh, thank you. These guys.
Yeah, give it up.
These guys. Do you want me to stay here? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll go through the good stuff.
Let's do one more. Okay, so.
If we have it, we'll play it again.
Okay, so sound's not working, but we will...
You get the idea.
This is a perfect example, but pay
Yeah.
attention to, his body language, and this is also another example of the 180-degree rule, cutting from an A camera to a B camera. You still get the sense that he's looking off to the right, and it's one of those really important things to keep in mind with it, too.
So one thing that we do, and one thing that is more of my role with how our interviews go, is I research and I know the questions I want to ask before I get to the interview, and we don't show up with a piece of paper. So I don't sit there with a piece of paper and make sure I'm bullet pointing every question that I wanted to get across. I know a lot of the answers I want him to say before we ever step in there. So know what you want to get out of your interviewer, and you're able to ask a lot of the questions and let questions tie in from other questions. Because again, a piece of paper can be really distracting. It can be rustling. It can pick that up on the mic, and it can distract him from saying something really emotional or diving in to something that he might talk a lot about. So we're
let's
going to
do
go
one.
through. That's a great face.
We'll do one interview of how, I guess, would be the right way to do it. You can kind of get an example.
Christian, welcome. Thank you for being here. We're so glad you can make it to North Dakota, to Bismarck. So tell me, how did you get started filmmaking? How old were you? What drew you to filmmaking?
Oh, it was watching movies. It was watching how movies were made, and those specials that would come on, and they would show you how they did things behind the scenes, and that just I guess was the bug that got me to really want to be motivated to make films and when I was a little kid. And I've just been now trying to make movies ever since, and it's been great. It's awesome. I love it, yeah.
So what was the first movie you ever made?
Wow. It was probably with my little brother, and he probably didn't want to be in it, and our dog, and it was in the mind of the dog, and we pretend the video camera went into the dog's head, and then it chased my brother around the house, and that was great. And that's where I started really learning how to work with actors, and really started learning how long it takes to make a movie and problems with dogs on set. So yeah, no, it was really fun. Yeah, and ever since I've been making movies since.
So what's the movie you're most proud of?
The movie I'm most proud of is probably the one I'm working on, or just finished right now, is my zombie movie, Zombies of the Living Dead. And I'm so proud of it, worked really hard on it. It's a fun movie, it's a comedy. You can tell when you watch this film, we're having a blast.
So what drew you to a zombie comedy movie compared to everything else you could do?
What drew me to a zombie comedy movie was, there's a lot of zombie movies right now. There's The Walking Dead. There's a lot of, television shows out there. And I thought, why not? They're fun. They're messy. Especially with comedy thrown in there to horror and gore, it can be really silly and something really fun. And they're just the technical aspect of it, it's just fun to work on a horror movie with friends. I know it looks disgusting on camera, but the fun we're having behind the scenes or making the movie, that's really, I think, why I chose to pick a zombie movie. They're just fun over other, a drama or something else like that. zombie films are really fun.
So is your brother still making zombie movies?
He is. He just made a music video, probably a few, I say just, but he made a music video with a zombie in it, starring me as the zombie, actually. Yeah, and it's Veil Tombs is his, Veil is his band, and Tombs is the music video, and it's about a zombie going around attacking these animal-like people. So it's like zombies and monsters in the music video. So yeah, we still have that young at heart, kids making movies aspect going on. So.
All right, give it up for Christian.
Yeah. And don't say like I was too. That's.
So there's some important things in there, and it's being fully engaged in what he's saying. You're the one interviewing him. Make sure you care about what he's saying to you, because you're the one that's going to be doing the editing and the actual putting together the film, and you want to make sure that he knows that you care what he's saying. And so that little bit, I picked up that he mentioned his brother, and even though he's here, his brother may not be as applicable to the story and what I want to get, but all of a sudden he started diving in to his brother. So we'll watch this real quick.
Ever since, and it's been great. It's awesome. I love it. Yeah.
So what was the first movie you ever made?
Wow. It was probably with my little brother, and he probably didn't want to be in it, and our dog, and it was in the mind of the dog, and we pretend the video camera went into the dog's head, and then it chased my brother around the house, and that was great. And that's where I started really learning how to work with actors, and really started learning how long it takes to make a movie, and problems with dogs on set. So yeah, no, it was really fun. Yeah, and ever since, I've been making movies since.
So what's the movie you're most proud of?
The movie I'm most proud of is probably the one I'm working on, or just finished right now, is my zombie movie, Zombies of the Living Dead. And I'm so proud of it, worked really hard on it. It's a fun movie, it's a comedy. You can tell when you watch this film, we're having a blast.
So what drew you to a zombie comedy movie?
We'll end that there.
Everything else. Real quick, but you get the idea, is that you can get a lot more authentic answers. And asking about his brother, even though it kind of led him down a rabbit trail, and asking what his brother's career choices are may not be very applicable to an interview about him, but all of a sudden he talked about a zombie movie or a zombie music video that he got to star in, and some more things that he's still working with his brother and doing films. And so it can lead to some fun things if you can pick up things that they're talking about that they really care about.
And the other thing to keep in mind too is this is definitely a skill. It takes time. Every time you're on set and you're doing an interview like this, you're gonna learn something from it. And Keenan, like I said, me and Keenan have been doing this a long time, and if that was me in the seat interviewing him, it would be horrible because I'm just not used to it. I'm not good at it. Keenan has done it hundreds of times and he knows how to do it well, and you'll learn. So don't be afraid to mess something up, but do your best and be authentic with it. And I kind of showed too at the end there, being able to capture body language, things like hand movements, things like that with the B camera without ever affecting the A camera. So
with that, we are going to sort of wrap up our presentation. Does anyone have any questions for us? They can be yes or no questions. Yeah. We do. We have 3 cameras. Well, we have more than
most
that.
setups we just use 2 for the sake of editing. It definitely can get a lot more work intensive doing more than 1 camera or 2 cameras, and file sizes obviously can get pretty hefty. We shoot with 4K so that we have some flexibility in post again, and so shooting 3 cameras only adds to that. So
all right. If you guys do have more questions,
feel free to email me and Keenan both at Keenan@Threefold and Caleb@Threefold.tv. We'd love to answer any questions. We'd love to be help to any of you. Honestly, if there's anything at all, we want to help the community and help you guys. So.
Or reach out to us on Instagram, ask us questions on there. And lastly, before we finish up, I want to give a big thank you to Jim and Dakota Media Access and all the work that they put in. Give them a round of applause. Thank you guys. Have a great afternoon.
view this program again, go to freetv.org or watch on Community Access Television. To order a copy, go to info@freetv.org or call 258-8767.